We're here today to talk about the growth trajectory of Chinese grassroots online opinion leaders. I guess we are talking about this topic as practitioners. And as many of you know that the Carter Center, we sponsor and develop a website called ChinaElections.org. And throughout, I guess, the past almost 10 years of operations and development of the website, there are a few questions that really drive this research or this study. First question we want to explore is, who are the influencers of online speech in China, in addition to your usual suspects like the journalists, celebrities like Ai Weiwei and Han, and other established intellectuals like scholars. And the second question is that how do ordinary citizens really use the internet and use these online communities to voice their opinions? And how do these people, without any kind of social establishment or media attention, become opinion leaders? So with that being said, I'm turning the floor to my colleague Calanthia May, who's going to walk us through some of the theories we looked at and also a model that we would like to propose.
Okay, thank you, Sean, for giving us such a great start. Our study represents initial attempts to highlight the group of grassroots online opinion leaders and to direct academic and policy attention to this group of highly influential people who have not received enough attention as their high-profile peers. We're also expecting to nurture grassroots online leaders in Chinese use. So with such purposes in mind, you may wonder, who is online opinion leaders? What is the origin of the word online opinion leader? And how should we redefine online opinion leader in this information age? Let's start our exploration tracking the evolution of online opinion leaders. So in 1944, American sociologist Paul Lazarsfeld, in his book The People's Choice, first coined the concept of opinion leader, which refers to agents who are active in interpersonal communication network, supplying information, opinions, and suggestions for people, exerting personal influence on others, and shouldering the idea guiding responsibility. In our opinion, the keyword in this definition is the idea guiding responsibility of the opinion leaders. With regards to the role of opinion leader, as suggested by this two-step communication flow, opinion leaders serve as a key medium intervening between the direct media message and the audience's reaction to that message. Developed by all the same, Paul Lazarsfeld and Liu who heads, this model asserts that information from the media moves in two stages. First, opinion leaders who pay close attention to mass media receive the information. Second, after injecting their own interpretation into the original content, they pass the finished products to the audience and therefore influence audience reactions and attitudes. With the development of virtual communities and the advent of online opinion leaders, we suggest necessary revisions on the very definition of opinion leaders are impending. In 1962, here's how Everett Rogers described opinion leader. They are with high social reputation, high social status, and high social responsibility. However, in this information age, the emerging group of online opinion leaders who reveal their real identities only by choice challenge the traditional boundary of opinion leader with indeterminacy in both social reputation and social status. Before we bring up this new creation of the definition of online opinion leader, I need to clarify one point. In the traditional notions, Robert Merton distinguishes two kinds of online opinion leadership, monomorphic and polymorphic. Due to our presumed scope of the online opinion leader within contains only the socio-political discussion, our study is mainly focused on the paradigm of monomorphic opinion leader within socio-political domain. So here comes our new definition of online opinion leaders. They are individuals who are active in online communities, feeding, guiding, and mastering the crowd with entrenching opinions on socio-political discourses, who function to promote the process of the aggregation of clustered cognitive consonants, and consequently the establishment of their own attentive audience groups, and increasingly fragmented online speech markets. Before we did our case study, we proposed a tentative model on the growth trajectory of online opinion leaders. First of all, we start with positioning. We assume that any individual who enter into such a virtual community or say speech market has a pre-existing political stance. With such positioning, they will experience a period of silence observation while they're still with a sense of ambition and broad vision. The individual begins his or her participation in silence, merely observing and spectating ongoing discussions and reading existing content. However, different from the silent majority, the potential opinion leaders always hold kind of a sense of confidence and ambition, aiming at high discourse power even in this very period of silence and observation. So after the period of silence, they will try their first attempts at publishing opinions, but often with a sense of reservation or uncertainty. Indeed, most individuals will find themselves in a rather intimidating environment when they first enter the speech market. And as the reality tells, they may also find they are facing like government censorship or say harsh responses from the peers. Such realization would then lead to the conscious modification of one's strategies or tone, which may become either more progressive or more moderate, and encourage individuals to employ certain tactics, which my colleague Shang will introduce in the case study. And then later on, they will enter into a process, long-term or medium-term process of proliferation and at the same time, the aggregation of acquaintances and supporters. Throughout this exercise, the individual will begin making acquaintances and attract followers, depending on the specific web mechanism that's available. Such sense of support and community will encourage the individual to speak out, and the fate of speaking out will vanish. So with the growth of one's proliferation of the quantity of one's writing, finally, assuming consistent quality and intellectual depth, the proliferation of individuals' opinion will attract a network of audience, which eventually turns the individual into an online figure who meets the criteria for online opinion leaders. So to sum up my parts, as a potential opinion leader, they may experience a growth trajectory of 9 stages. Start from the pre-existing part of positioning, they will experience a period of silence and observation, often with ambition and broad vision. And they will start their first attempts, but unfortunately intimidated by external forces like censorship or say external forces like harsh responses from the peers. And they will therefore induce strategic modifications and employ certain tactics, which will lead to the proliferation of their quantity of writings. And then at the same time, they will gather acquaintances and supporters, which will finally lead to a network of audience and finally opinion leader. Now I'll turn the floor to my colleague Shang to introduce the case studies.
As we mentioned earlier, in order to test this model, we base our studies on looking at a few cases from the ChinaElections.org website. I guess just a few more words on the website itself for a little bit of propaganda. The website was founded in 2002 by the center, and it's actually considered by many Chinese scholars on Chinese politics as one of the most popular websites on this topic. And it was also awarded the Website of the Year by Southern Weekend back in 2009. And now we have approximately 2 million visits each month, or 3 million page views each month, which I believe is not too bad for a sort of a political website. Now, if you're trying to log on the website right now, it's temporarily shut down. I will explain the reasons if you're interested later, but let's move on to our selection criteria for these cases. Now, we are looking at a few sort of criteria that determine whether somebody could be selected as a grassroots opinion leader. And those criteria can be divided into 2 categories. The first category is the internal traits of these writers. First, they need to be more interested, involved, and updated in what's happening, and they need to have energetic thoughts about what's happening in Chinese politics and society. In other words, they gotta know what they're talking about. Secondly, they need to manifest a unique communication behavior or manners in their discussions, meaning that they have to have a unique or identifiable writing style that attracts their own audiences and readers, and they need to know how to communicate with their audiences and the community. Thirdly, they are usually sufficiently aware that they are themselves sources of information or influence for others, meaning that these writers or contributors know the consequences of their writings and of their inputs. A second category of the selection criteria deals with the external traits, meaning that how these opinion leaders are perceived by the communities and the audience in general. So first of all, they are usually considered experts in their online communities. In this case, the ChinaElections.org website. This is done usually through informal recognition by participants of the discussions, and also by people like us, the moderators and acquaintances, and also the web editors. Secondly, they also have to have a fair amount of hits to their articles. You won't be regarded as opinion leader if your articles only have dozens of hits once it's published. Thirdly, they need to be more exposed to mass media and the non-leaders. Their commentary needs to be recycled, reposted, or even featured at other websites or even traditional media like print newspapers. And the last note I want to mention in terms of the selection criteria is that we need to make sure that these opinion leaders have no affiliation with us or with the other editors of the website, meaning that my cousin or whoever cannot be selected as a case in this study. Moving on to the cases. Based on the selection criteria I just mentioned, we chose 4 contributors to the website. Dao Ning, Wang Xiao, who actually uses his real name, Lin Mingli, another real name. For some reason you can't see the other 2 names, but it's Xu Ping, who's another person who uses a pen name, and also right, Xu Ming, that's the 4th one. I'm sorry, I apologize. I thought there's another one to the right. Now, just a quick look at all these opinion leaders and how they grew throughout the years. This is the sort of popularity trend of articles published by Dao Ning from 2008 all the way until 2012. He published over 300 articles. And if you look at some of the critical moments in that growth trajectory, he first entered the elections website by talking about Mao Zedong's changes in Yan'an, Chinese peasant Mao Zedong. Now, these are successful attempts, but they really didn't win him a lot of support or network or audience within the community. And then he switched to talking about daily news. He basically started a series on his own talking about or commenting on Chinese news on a daily basis. And that we see as a strategic modification that he himself consciously made to make sure that he gets a lot more audience, a lot more readers for what he's writing. I also want to highlight that he, during that series of comments, he decided to experiment with something new. Again, the modification. He started to actually comment on CCTV news more specifically. And that wasn't quite a successful operation or successful modification, and which led to his basically quick switch back to his own daily comments on news. Second person we looked at, Wang Xiao. Again, you can see, he didn't write as many articles as Dao Ning, but he started much earlier in 2005 with the website. Wang Xiao is really all about knowing what to write about and knowing the topic. He started writing for the website by focusing on, topics that are, sort of general. Why Phoenix TV is restricted, Cultural Revolution, which a lot of people write about for our website. But then after these first attempts, he started to make modifications to his style as well as the topic. He started to write about leaders. As early as 2009, he started to write about Bo Xilai, quite forward-looking, I should say. And less than a year later, he wrote another article about Bo Xilai. And then subsequently, he started to write about more articles about Chinese leaders, Wen Jiabao, and then political reform. And toward the end, I want to highlight that last article. I call for a ceasefire between the left and the right. I think that shows that he already has a sort of a network of audience that he's consciously aware are following him. So he's trying to become or perceive himself as an opinion leader within that group. Lin Mingli, I won't spend too much time here explaining this chart, but he really is a sort of a unique case. He's sort of a flip-flop in terms of what he's talking about. He usually tries to sort of write about also sort of hot topics like Ai Weiwei, but then moving on in his growth trajectory, he also responds to different kind of articles and opinions, and he sometimes seems to be conservative, sometimes seems to be liberal. So, and that really, we believe, is also a strategy that he adopted consciously to gain support and to win audiences. Last case, Xu Ping. Now, Xu Ping is really all about style. He first started talking about sort of general censorship issues. You know, you can't lie to everyone forever. That's on the Chinese censorship, a Q&A regarding sensitive terms. And then, I guess, after those first attempts, he made a modification, decided to really cultivate a sort of a special style. He started to talk about historical events or historical stories in a very sort of satirical or even storytelling fashion. And if you look at his Chinese articles, he really has that unique writing style that keeps attracting readers and keeps attracting commenters. So again, we think that that is also a sort of a conscious modification he made on his part. To conclude this study, I guess I want to highlight, first of all, it's impossible to map out or to have clear-cut points in all these sort of growth trajectories, where they felt that intimidation, where they started, when they started to modify, and when they built a network. But I guess overall, and to some extent, we do see that general pattern in all these opinion leaders. I think that, at least to some extent, proved the validity of our model. And the second point I want to highlight is that the choice of topics and article titles is very important. Or I guess in Chinese, there's a word called the title party or 标题党. So when you have a very attractive title, that really expedites things for the growth of your opinion leadership. And lastly, I want to acknowledge that a lot of these variables, obviously important, like search engine optimization, the technological advancement, and also improvements in web design, all of these sort of exogenous variables do have an impact on how these opinion leaders grow. But again, I think for our study, we don't really have that kind of time and resources to delve into that, but I think they do deserve some further investigation. And that's our presentation. Thank you for your time.